Wake up people, wake up, wake up. Wake up people, wake up now, wake up. Wake up people, wake up, wake up. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up. Wake up people, wake up, wake up. Wake up people, wake up now, wake up. Wake up people, wake up, wake up. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
It's alright. It's okay. Remember, the sun will shine in the morning. God bless. Wake up.
This show is sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
Greetings family, greetings. This is Brother Jegna bringing you another Afrocentricity Bookman show. I hope you guys are all well. This is another new year using the European calendar. I hope everything's good with you. I hope you're looking forward to a new year with some new ideas in your mind. I hope the information that you get from this show makes you think, makes you rethink, makes you think about revolution, and makes you think that we need to change our condition. We need to change the way we think about the world, about ourselves, about our community. We need to understand who our friends are and who our enemies are. So this is Brother Jegna bringing you another Afrocentricity Bookman show. Remember, every Sunday between 4 and 6 p.m. we go through the best books, the best lectures, the best essays. We'll have guests in there in the studio as well. So the key thing is that we look at the world through our own spectacles, not rose-colored but kind of African colored spectacles. It's important that we see the world through our own eyes. We look at the world in relation to our culture, in relation to our history, in relation to our values, in relation to what is good for us and what is bad for us, and then we make the correct decision after that. So we have been reading for the past few weeks the book called The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones, which is an excellent book. It's really a book about psychology. Franklin Jones tells us explicitly that we are subject to a mind control system, and that's why the book was called The Black Matrix. I'm sure you remember, if you see the film, The Matrix is that there is a world what people believe is true, and then there's a real world which is really the truth, which is truly reality. But most people are led to believe that what the Matrix tells them to do. Similarly, talks about the Black Matrix. Many of us believe the world is a certain way because we look at the news at 9 and we look at the news at 10. We look at the BBC and ITV and CNN, and whatever they believe us, we believe is true. We read the newspapers and we believe it's the truth. But when you lift up the hood of your car, lift up the bonnet and look underneath, you see that something else is happening. And that is what this book is about, is to make us aware that something else is not overt, it's kind of covert, and something else is going on in the world. And it is, put simply, a manipulation of our mindset, a manipulation of what we believe is true, and a manipulation of what reality is for us. And we walk around like kind of robots, like automatons, to the way we're programmed by the media, by the newspapers, by books, and everything else. So the book really pulls aside the veil so we can see more clearly, we can understand what is happening. And that's, again, what Afrocentricity is really about. Afrocentricity is about changing our consciousness, putting a deeper African consciousness into our mind. And when you have the African consciousness in your mind, it allows you to discriminate, allows you to analyze, allows you to maybe see things which you didn't see before. That always remember that song by Johnny Nash, I Can See Clearly Now. It helps you to see clearly, maybe for the first time. Some things you just took as read, as normal, as the status quo, turns out it's not necessarily so. So where are we in our book? In our book we are on page 102, and this new chapter is called How School Integration Diffused Black Advancement. So he's speaking about, in particular, the USA. That's where he comes from, but he does say in the book that the information he's passing is about black people, African people worldwide. We are all under this similar mind control. I mean, if you think of an example, we saw that violence in South Africa. We saw Africans from South Africa bringing violence against Africans from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and all other places. So why would Africans want to kill other Africans? Did those Africans do anything to them? Those Africans helped to fight them during apartheid, fight for them during apartheid, and help the ANC during apartheid. But Europeans who have stole the land, stole all the resources, still own 80% of the land, not a finger is raised against them. Why would that be? Why would the people who you know have stolen everything reduce you to paupers in your own land? Not a word is said. Maybe words are said, but not a finger is raised against them. But your brothers, fellow Africans, who, the nations they come from, Nigeria, Gambia, Zimbabwe, have been under the same race war which has been waged against Africans, and have been divested of their wealth, their land, and many other things. Those are the people you want to kill. So why would you do that? Why wouldn't you want to fight the people who are you ultimately? Look in the mirror, they're you. And they're in the same position as you. Why would you want to fight and actually kill them? But the people who stole from you and still own all your stolen resources. Billions was taken out of Africa, but not a finger is raised. That just shows you that the minds of the Africans of South Africa, better called Tanzania, minds must be manipulated, because it's unnatural for them to want to fight people in the same boat as them. But let me continue with the book, yeah? So we're reading the Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. We are on page 102, and again the heading is How School Integration Diffused Black Advancement. So before the 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, which overturned the principle of separate but equal education, African Americans had made significant educational gains following the abolishment allegedly of slavery. They did this in spite of living with brutal racist oppression and deadly violence. In an effort to resuscitate their culture and history, education was seen as necessary for the upward mobility of African Americans. Many African American writers, through the publication of slave narratives and scholarly works, wrote amazing bodies of non-fiction work aimed at educating black people. Many African Americans could be found reading literature by W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, Carter G. Woodson, Langston Hughes, J.A. Rogers, and a host of other black writers. These literary pieces were works of resistance aimed at transforming black consciousness. Black literacy, which was 30% in 1919, and it had dropped to less than 7% by 1955. Black literacy had almost disappeared in the North, and in some areas black literacy was less than the white literacy, such as in New York. In 1950, the black colleges had 71,000 students. Nearly all were in the South. 500 and 53 African Americans had doctorate degrees. Black-owned and operated publishing companies were abundant, and education for critical consciousness was a vital part of this cultural revolution. The intellectual growth of African Americans following slavery was extraordinary. This was clearly made evident by thousands of applications for patents submitted to the U.S. patent offices during the late 1800s through the early 1900s by African Americans. So there was, just after slavery, there was abundance of patents issued because designers designed everything you can think about, inventors. This was absolutely remarkable so shortly after slavery, and while still enduring racial persecution. Although African American students were attending poorly funded, desegregated schools, many black teachers were restoring the damaged psyche of African American students by including literature produced by renowned African American writers and scholars. This provided the students with a body of literature that featured black heroes and various contributions of African Americans. These materials informed black students that they were more than merely the descendants of slaves and the children of sharecroppers. Moreover, it offered the hope and stimulated the desire for greater aspirations. This literature of resistance transformed the black consciousness, and this did not last long. For integrating black students into schools indifferent to their contributions of blacks diffused the growth of black consciousness and self-efficacy. Instead, the shackles of mental slavery were reapplied psychologically, retarding the esteem and potential of many African American students. So what's he saying here? What is Franklin Jones saying here? He's saying when black people was in their own neighborhoods, the black teachers gave the children, as part of the regular curriculum, books about African and African American history. W. Du Bois, J. A. Rogers, Carter G. Woodson, countless books. So there was reading information, scholarship by black scholars. However, after the 1954 law, Brown versus the Board of Education, they opened up the schools. Black children started to go to white school thinking they're going to get better education because the schools were white. However, there was much better funding, much more books. However, the curriculum within these schools was white supremacy. What do I mean by that? It means that black people were non-existent within the curriculum. Everything was praising whiteness, praising white genius, praising white belief systems, praising white everything. So going to the schools, they think that they was getting a better education, but what happened? They was getting a miseducation, and that continues even today. So they were better off in their own neighborhoods, because at least the African American teachers were giving them a diet or scholarship from African scholars. But when they went into these white schools, these European mindseted schools, they was getting white supremacy as education. So, as you know, when you leave school after white supremacy, a black child hates themselves because they were not taught anything about themselves. I continue. After the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the federal government sponsored a study that was supposed to examine the differences among school resources allocated to black and white students. The idea was that by pinpointing the advantages available to white students, policies could be made that would replicate those opportunities for black students. However, during the integration of America's schools, the government failed to produce culturally relevant instructions for black students as it habitually did for white students. Instead, black children were integrated into white schools without accommodative adjustments to the curriculum. The implications was that blacks had contributed nothing to society. Arguably, in American education, the achievement and contributions of African Americans have been largely neglected and receive less attention in terms of quality, historical scholarship than any other topic. As a result, black students were bereft of robust historical information that could serve as a platform for future efforts. These African American students who doggedly survive their stifling grade schools experiences find that their high school situations were even more challenging. Tragically, many teachers and administrators who experience difficulty working with these students often misdiagnose them as having behavioral or learning disorders, or misuse special education programs to remove their students from the classroom. Many studies across the nation find that black students are more than twice as likely to be suspended or expelled from school as white students. In schools where corporal punishment was permitted, some past studies found that black students were 5 times more likely to be hit by school adults than were the whites, and 3 times more likely to be kicked out of or placed into an educable, mentally retarded or behavior disorder. So I must say this is no different to happen here. Our children in these schools, and there's many studies on this, are kicked out of schools 5, 10, 15, 20 times quicker than other children for the same kind of behavior. It was an attempt to use their studies and findings to validate this premise as it relates to black students. It is outrageous how white researchers can ignore their own premise when applied to black people. Even in seeing and or hearing, they do not register or observe any facts that conflict with their innate proclivity for racism. Oliver Wendell Holmes once remarked that the eye of the bigot may be compared to the pupil of the eye, in that the more light poured into it, the more it contracts. Very important, very good, very clever there. As you know, when your eye sees light, a bright light, your pupil contracts, gets smaller. He's saying that the eye of the bigot as well happens to them as well. So I think that's saying no one can see as those who don't want to see. I have also conducted countless interviews with African American students, often identified as unteachable, unmotivated, disrupted, and troublemakers. I have heard repeated painful testimonies from black students besieged with deep internalized feelings of self-doubt and self-hatred. They could not always fully articulate the source of their problem, but they consistently reported that it had something to do with their blackness, and that neither alcohol nor drugs could remove the hurtful feelings. One such testimony that stands out is that of a very articulate 6th grader who gave an account of her painful elementary school experience. She said, "From the 1st grade on, I never learned good things about myself, and it hurt so much that you want to rip off your skin and jump into a new one. You wish you were never that color and never born sometimes." A distraught 7th grader student in a well-respected school declared, "I came from a race that did nothing, created nothing, and wrote nothing. Therefore, I must be nothing." A 15-year-old 10th grader stated, "We're often told to be proud, but we are really given anything to be proud of. I heard these sentiments from many students who talked about feeling inadequate, self-loathing, and low self-confidence, which they felt had something to do with their blackness. Many black students spoke authentically of the present inequalities faced in the schools and how hurtful it is. This internalized turmoil and hopelessness is very common for many black students. I have heard these stories from hundreds of black students in various states across the nation. They all complain that the curriculum was too white, that they learned too little about themselves, and that their inner self-esteem and self-images suffered as a result. It was apparent through these discussions that black children sense the nation's indifference regarding their pains. As I listened to them, any doubt that I had about the power of racism and its potential for maiming the human spirits was removed. I felt the pain of these black students whose culture is so often denied and who see the beauty of their heritage so really acknowledged or honoured, and I feel their pain of rejection. So that's deep, and I'm sure many of you who listen to this understand this and know this very well. I remember back in the day, not now, but I remember some African leaders would say, oh, let's face it, black people did nothing. They've got no history. And why would they say that? Because they're educated by their enemy. Malcolm X said, only a fool will allow the enemy to educate their children. Can we deny what Malcolm X said? So if you're in a school for like 6-7 hours a day, and every day over your 10 years of schooling, 15 years of schooling, whatever it is, you are told nothing about self, but you're shown the greatness of other people, what's going to happen to the child when they come out after that 10 plus years of schooling? Because you must remember that when the children come out of school, the TV doing the same thing. The newspapers are doing the same thing. The movies are doing the same thing. So they all reinforce each other. It doesn't take much to think about. Racists cannot make institutions that are non-racist. It's impossible. How can a racist remember, your institutions come from your center, come from who you are. If you're a racist, your institutions have to be racist. How can there be anything else? If you're building a house and the bricks are red, the house is going to be red. The bricks are not going to be any other colour because the bricks are red, so that's what the colour of the house. If you're a racist, you're eccentric, your institutions, yeah. So I would say to people, don't listen to what people say. Oh, don't worry, we can go to the court. Don't worry, we've got democracy. Don't worry, we've got policies. Don't worry about what they say. Look at their institutions. When you see how the institutions act, then you know about the people. I think I said last week, look at the Windrush scandal. How were our elders who came here to rebuild this country treated? It's because of their institutions. They've been here 40, 50, 60 years, and all of a sudden, you're not a citizen anymore. They pay taxes for 40, 50, 60 years, but however, you can't get NHS treatment anymore. One person who unfortunately died, he originally had a cancer treatment, and when he went to the hospital to get treatment, said, sorry, you have to pay for it. He's been here, he's been paying his taxes and national insurance for 30, 40 years. Why were only black people treated like this? You don't hear these same Windrush stories about Chinese, Japanese, or any other people. Why is it only the people of African descent face that? Because the institutions are created by the people. And if the people are racist, the institutions have to be racist. Can it be anything else? Let's be serious. So the people, institutions are a reflection of the people because it was created from their mind. The future of any race is extremely dependent upon the proper nurturing and education of its children. All children, regardless of their race, need an education that tells them who they are and what they have accomplished as a people. Therefore, a failure to rectify the problem assures the destruction of black Americans. This hypothesis is not new. Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So I'm sure you all know Carter G. Woodson, or at least about him, because Carter G. Woodson, the reason we have Black History Month comes from Carter G. Woodson. He started, this is back in the 1920s, in the USA, Negro History Week, it was originally called, which came Black History Month, and our version of Black History Month really came, so he was the kind of mainstay behind that. But he wrote the book, which you can get today. You can buy it, you can get I think you can see it on YouTube as well. But you can buy it as an ebook. You can buy copies of it. It's called The Miseducation of the Negro. Obviously, Negro, the term for African back in the day. But the term, even the term Negro, when you see the root of it, it's so negative. We should never use the term. Negro is no better than the word nigger. But he wrote The Miseducation of the Negro in 1931. The thought of the inferiority of the Negro is drilled into him in almost every classroom he enters and in almost every book he studies. And by teaching him that his black face is a curse and that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless, is the worst sort of lynching, because it kills his aspirations and dooms him to vagabondage and crime. So they see that is Carter G. Woodson in 1931. So when we see some of our children turn to crime, we think, what's wrong with them? Are they? The school system set them on the route to that. If you're aware of, and I've mentioned before, the black doll, white doll test, from a very young age, our children are taught, because they will grow up in this type of system, that there is something not quite good about your color skin. Your beautiful, rich skin, they see it as something terrible. And the Bible was used as well, all this curse of ham rubbish, as well to kind of to reinforce that foolishness. So when we see our children maybe turn to crime or drink or drugs or anything else which takes away the pain or that, the school system is the root of it. And basically the root of it is the culture that they grew up in. A white supremacist, racist culture, that is really the root of it. The school system is just a reflection of the people who created the system itself. Educational system is actually a miseducational system when it comes to black people. I continue. Dr. Woodson's analysis was that one's information determines one's attitude, and attitude determines one's behavior. Therefore, he concluded that African American, and just put black people generally, African American youth are not only being miseducated but actually de-educated. Did you understand that? They're not only miseducated, they're being de-educated. That they are being systematically excluded from the educational curriculum, and that their self-esteem is being systematically destroyed as a result. However, his words, written over 70 years ago, were never fully embraced, even by black educators. So that's very deep. So this is Brother Jegno. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman Show. We are reading The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. It's an excellent book. It's a book we should have on. Just Google The Black Matrix, or go to theblackmatrix.com and you can buy a copy of this book. You'll not be able to buy this book in Amazon and places like that. So you have to go to theblackmatrix.com and order your book. That's what I did. It takes a little while to come by the post from the USA, but it's a book well worth reading. It helps us to understand what is happening to our psyche, to our minds, and the minds of our children is the part I'm just talking about now. At the beginning of the book, they spoke to a Russian KGB agent who used to go into countries and they used to indoctrinate people. And he says, when you want to indoctrinate the people, it takes a generation. Why? Because imagine your child and he goes through the school system. What happens to that child 20 years old? He's been indoctrinated into their inferiority. And then when that 20-year-old is now a parent, what are they going to teach their children? They're going to teach their children what they were taught. So it becomes self-fueling. So if you want to indoctrinate people, indoctrinate them for a generation. And then that new generation, when they're adults now, my apologies, the older generation now to become adults, they continue. That's how Christianity got into our community so much. Because Christianity was beaten into people, and then their children was educated the same way. So we think that Jesus is going to save us. We think that Jesus is coming next week or sometime, and he's going to save us. This is not to attack people who are Christians, because I just said to you how it happens to us. Remember, the people who enslaved and murdered us were the Christians, and that's how we found out about this Christianity. And when our generation is taught it, then they just teach it to the generation and the generation and the generation after that, and after that, and after that. So we then believe that, wow, Christianity, Jesus is the greatest person. And also, I read a book before, The White Image of God. The white image of God to a black child. If you go to many children, black children, say to them, what colour is God? They'll say God is white. So if children are very smart, if God is white and your skin is a nice chocolate brown, who are you? Clearly, you may be not one of God's children, because God's children are white skin. I was in a church many years ago. It was a funeral. Went to the church, and they had like a projector, and they put these images up in the church, and it showed this white Jesus, and everybody with him was white. And this is a black church. The only people in the church are black people, by the way. And the young children go into these churches and see these images Sunday after Sunday. They see it in their books, in their pictures, everything like that. So the children say to themselves, if I've got a chocolate colour skin, lighter or darker, but God is white and all the angels are white and everybody's white, who the hell am I? And it's not easy for them to imagine, say, I wish I wasn't this colour, because if I was a lighter skin, maybe I might be one of God's people, one of Jesus' people. And that's why it was given to us. So we're easy to rule. When our self-esteem has been crushed into the ground, and it's reinforced every day of the week, every day of the week they wake up, and let's be truthful, even in their dreams, it's been crushed, then what does it do to us? So when we say sometimes, why do black people act like that? Why are they doing this? Why we don't do this? It's the system designed to keep us in this position. But when you understand what is happening to us and to our children, that is when we can counter it. It's only when you understand what is happening that you can do something about it. If you're not aware of it, before I came out today, there's a little video, and it's in South Africa, and there's a person, an African, Tanzanian, African, South African, sitting in his car on a beach. And this white man comes up to the car and says, I'm poor, can you help me? Can you give me some money? And he actually says, the African says, I can't give you any money. What my people think, what my ancestors think. You people came here, killed us, raped us, murdered us, left us impoverished. You've taken all the wealth, the gold, the silver, the diamonds, but you want me to help you. I didn't see the whole video, but I just saw the intro, yeah? But when you read the comments below, the comments written by black, African, South Africans, all of them was attacking the black guy. How could he do this? He's not Christian. Oh, if I see someone who's poor, I've been poor before, why didn't you help him? But if you were poor and you're a white person, say to you, please help me, what's that white person going to say to you? What do white people call us? What do we hear at football matches? No matter where these Europeans are all across the world, we hear at cricket matches. So our mentality has been beaten down so much, we always want to help our oppressors. Did you see that trial recently in the USA? And the guy, he came from the Caribbean, was in his house, and a policeman went into his house and she shot him dead. She went into his house saying, I thought it was my own house, and she shot the man dead. And the power of the system on our minds was illustrated by this case. So 3 things I can tell you. Number 1, during the trial, the brother of his brother was killed, said during the trial, or at the end of the trial, after she'd been found guilty of killing him, Please, let me hug her. I just must hug her. He wanted to hug the woman who had slaughtered his brother in his own house. He wanted to hug him. He started to shake and he had tears. He wanted to hug the murderer of his brother. Secondly, the judge. The judge, after she was found guilty, hugged the woman. This is the murderer now. Hugged her. Gave her her own Bible. Here you are. And also, there was a policewoman, a black policewoman, and she was stroking her hair. Stroking this woman as a policewoman. Let me say, this policewoman, she shot somebody. However, she's training first aider. She didn't give him any first aid. She didn't call an ambulance. She called another policeman. If you shot somebody and you really did it by accident, wouldn't you call an ambulance? Wouldn't you carry out first aid? Because she's a policewoman. She must know basic first aid. But you get the brother crying to hug her up. You get the judge want to hug her up. Remember? Black judge hugging her up. And you get another black woman who's stroking her hair in a courtroom. This is what this type of education does to us. We cannot see anything else other than adoring these people. It has to happen. As Carter G. Woodson said. Carter G. Woodson says in the book Miseducation of the Negro, he says, once you've been indoctrinated, you don't have to worry about that person. He's been indoctrinated. Doesn't matter how strong and big he is. He says, you do not tell him to go around to the back door. He'll go there on his own accord. And he goes on to further says, and if there's not a back door there, he will make one. Do you understand how deep that is? If there's not a back door there, he will make one. And that's what they've done to our minds. And that's what this book about. So we really need to order The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones so we can understand what has happened to us. On and on and on. It's relentless. Unfortunately, our children are getting this today. This is why our own supplementary schools are so powerful. This is why educating our children at home is so powerful. Because they do not have to go through this white supremacy system. It destroys our minds. Didn't you hear what these children said, what I just read out a little bit earlier? They says that one girl said she wanted to rip her skin off and jump into another skin because she was told nothing about herself. Clearly we did nothing. Also, when you worship a God not your own, you are giving divinity to the ancestors of the people of that God. So if Europeans give you their God, you're empowering their God and you're empowering their ancestors. But the worst part is you're taking away your own divinity. If you do not see a God, creator, goddess, whatever in your own image, you're saying that you cannot be divine. And if you take away your own divinity, who are you? When you understand African spirituality, you know that the creator is within you. Because the creator created everything. The trees, the birds, the rivers, the seas. And we are created. So the essence of the creator, the spirit of the creator is in with all of us. However, when you worship a God not your own, you don't see divinity in yourself, you've despiritualized yourself. That's why sometimes we accept the worst treatment from people, because we do not see ourselves as divine. We do not see ourselves as worth. We see ourselves as having any worth. I just read it earlier what these children said after they went through the school systems, which devalued them. When you worship a God not your own, you devalue your spirituality. They just said that the children was not only miseducated, they were de-educated. So we are despiritualized when we worship spiritual systems not our own. But when we don't understand, we continue it. But this is why the theme tune of this radio show is Wake Up. We have to wake up. We have to teach each other. It's not about hatred. Who's talking about hatred? It's about love. We must love self. Everybody loves self first. You cannot love other people unless you love yourself. You cannot respect other people unless you respect yourself. So this is foundation stuff. It's very important that we understand what's going on. Sometimes I say, why do black people do this? Why are we acting like that? We don't understand. Why would the African Tanzanians, South Africans, kill Africans like that? Because it's the system I'm talking about. This is the only time it makes sense. Oh, maybe that's what happens. Apart from that, they call it xenophobia. But it's not xenophobia. If it's xenophobia, they'll be killing Chinese, they'll be killing Pakistanis, Indians and white people. But did you see them killing that? No, so it's not xenophobia. It's negrophobia. It's Afrophobia. Because that's what's been put into our minds from a young age. Until we destroy these institutions that Europeans created, we're going to continue doing it. After independence of African nations, the Europeans left, but their institution was still in place. Education, religion. If the institutions are still in place, it's like the Europeans haven't left. These are the things we need to understand, my family, because I love you more than life itself. We need to understand. I continue. Remember, this is the Afrocentricity Bookman show. We read the best books, and when you've got your own eyes, you can analyze these things. Many things I'm saying, people can analyze it this way. Why? Because they're locked into that Eurocentric mindset. They're locked into that paradigm. I think it was, his name will come to me, he said, when you're locked into this paradigm, it's being locked in a white cell. Locked into white madness. I continue. Therefore, the seat of the trouble was in what African Americans were being taught about themselves. He concluded that African Americans, and maybe just think African people, African youth, are not only being miseducated but actually de-educated. That they are being systematically excluded from the educational curriculum, and that their self-esteem is being systematically destroyed as a result. However, his words, written over 70 years ago, were never fully embraced by even black educators. And imagine, he said this 70 years ago, and educators today are not even aware of this. Why is that? How can black educators not be aware of this? Why are some African nations, and African nations, West Indies and the Caribbean as well, still have European systems in place? In the so-called Caribbean, there is the University of West Indies. Who created the curriculum for this thing? Who created the curriculum for the University of the West Indies? University of West Indies creates some brilliant scientists, by the way, and some brilliant scholars. However, who created this system? What are the minds of these Africans as they come out of these systems? Yet his insights, this is Carter G. Woodson's insights, were prophetic. For now, his analysis accurately defines the conditions of African American life, or black people's lives today. Moreover, this premise is shared and endorsed by some of our most prestigious black psychologists, scholars, educators, activists, sociologists, and other visionaries. So, do we agree with this? It's very important that we understand what's happened to us and what we need to do to combat it. And he said earlier in the book, we must use the latest technology. We've got so many channels now. Shakara of Got Kush TV and Akeblan has a brilliant channel where he speaks to some of the greatest scholars and minds, and we need to tune into these things. Wake Up Africa by Dr. Mumbi. We need to tune into these channels on YouTube. There's African American History channel by my brother Michael Imhotep. We need to tune into these channels. These channels are there to educate us. We cannot rely on the BBC, the CNN, because they're selling the same lie. They're all what they do. I remember this is years ago. I remember I saw a documentary, not a documentary, I saw a lecture years ago by Malefiketi Asante. And he said, the only thing Europeans do is that which empowers them. And I had to think about it. What does he mean by that? He says, everything they do to empower themselves. Francis Cross Wellsing said that white supremacy works in religion, employment, education, entertainment, sex, and that's not all of them. That's what's come to my mind at the moment. So every area of human activity, white supremacy works in every single area. This is what we need to understand. We need to understand that. If you do not understand white supremacy and how it works, everything that you think you do understand will only confuse you. This is why I do this show, to educate us. We need to educate each other. I learn stuff every day. I speak to people. I read books every single day. We have to understand what's happening to us. If we don't, we can continue going round and round in circles, making the same mistakes over and over again. Moreover, this premise is shared and endorsed by some of our most prestigious black psychologists, scholars, educators, activists, and sociologists, and other visionaries. Such notables include W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. Bobby Wright, I read his book earlier, Dr. Joseph Ben Yochanan, who was my favorite, Dr. John Henry Clark, ancestor now, Bishop Henry M. Turner, Marcus Garvey, Stephen Biko, Malcolm X. And if you notice, Marcus Garvey, Stephen Biko, Malcolm X, what happened to them? What happened to Steve Biko? What happened to Marcus Garvey? What happened to Malcolm X? This should open our eyes, people. Gordon Allport and Frantz Fanon. These brilliant black thinkers have all agreed that the education of black students in a system designed to affirm and maintain white supremacy is a form of psychological genocide. Let me repeat that. These brilliant black thinkers have all agreed that the education of black students in a system designed to affirm and maintain white supremacy is a form of psychological genocide, which Dr. Bobby Wright said was called mentorcide. Please Google it. Accordingly, they all saw the re-education of black children as being of fundamental importance towards the progress of African Americans. Accordingly, I'm repeating, they all saw that the re-education of black children as being of fundamental importance towards the progress of African people. This hypothesis is strengthened further by historical data, such as the findings of Dr. Kenneth Clark, who with his wife Mamie Clark, I should say, who've performed several significant studies demonstrating how the self-esteem of black children is damaged by white racism. The most famous study in 1947, and remember, 1947, what year are we in now? People have done studies in 1947, and people tend to say, what's wrong? Why are there gangs? Why are certain things happening? 1947, this information been going on since. But when we read the work, the studies of our enemies, we're not going to get to the truth. That's why we have to read what our scientists, our psychologists, our educators, activists, sociologists, and scholars have said. This is the only way we're going to get to the truth. This hypothesis is strengthened further by the historical data, such as the findings of Dr. Kenneth Clark, who performed several significant studies demonstrating how the self-esteem of black children is damaged by white racism. The most famous study in 1947 yielded the conclusions that many black children overwhelmingly associate negative with being black and positive with being white. The study involved 253 black school children who were asked to choose between one of two dolls that were identical except in color. One was white and the other was painted brown. Dr. Clark asked the children to identify the doll that best represented certain positive statements and the one that best represented certain negative statements. 2/3 of the children exhibited that the best represented certain negative statements. 2/3, I'll repeat, my apologies. 2/3 of the children exhibited a preference for the white doll in connection with the positive statements, and a preference for the black doll in relation to the negative statements. An outcome that was widely interpreted as striking evidence of low black self-esteem. So those who are not familiar with it, he'd say, show me the doll which is the beautiful doll. Show me the doll that you'd like to play with. Show me the doll which is the good doll. And show me, vice versa, show me the ugly doll. Show me the doll of the naughty child. Show me, and went on and on. 2/3 went for the one against their own colour of skin. And in some of the studies, the worst part is when they showed a preference for the best statements for the white doll, they will say to the child, what colour are you? Or which doll represents your colour? And you see him kind of flinch, and then you see him start to think, and you can see the distress in their eyes. Some of them start to go for the white doll, then they realise, no, it's not one. And then they sort of say to themselves, damn. Oh, that's the doll I said was the bad doll. The ugly doll. The doll is horrible. The doll I don't want to play with. So from a young age, our children go through this. Every day in schools. Every day. Isn't tomorrow Monday? What's going to happen to them? That's why we need to have our own systems. That's why we need to educate our own system. Because they're in a system which is created for their psychological genocide, as the book said earlier. Anybody who thinks that what I'm saying is overstated or I'm barking at the wrong tree, just look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. Remember, this was done in 1947. We are in 2020 now in this Gregorian calendar, which is not our calendar, by the way. If you use our calendar, it's 6,700, yeah, BC, or by apologies, AD now, yeah, okay. The study involved 253 black children. 2/3 saw negativity in their own skin colour. Clark's work was cited in a 1954 US Supreme Court decision outlawing segregated schools. But what they didn't understand was, by desegregating the schools and sending them to the so-called white schools, it just reaffirmed. Remember, those going to school, the curriculum was white supremacist curriculums. So it did not make things better. Going into a nice, beautiful school with nice books and beautiful lights and polished floors, if the curriculum is still that sort of curriculum created by a racist, your child's going to come out there the same way. Pretty school, nice shiny floors and shiny walls, nicely painted, but they're still getting the same appetite. The appetite which is detrimental to them. Dr. Clark's famous doll test 4 decades later in 1985. Dr. Darlene Powell, my apologies, Dr. Darlene Powell, a clinical psychologist in Connecticut, repeated Dr. Clark's famous doll test 4 decades later in 1985. Her work, which involved preschoolers, ended disturbingly with the findings nearly identical to what Dr. Clark's findings 4 decades earlier. Nearly 2/3 of the black children preferred white dolls. In addition, 3 out of 4 of the black children said black dolls look bad. See, they're talking about themselves. One study asked participants to characterize black people. Participants nearly always rated the dark skin among the black people as less attractive, less successful, less emotionally healthy, and less intelligent than the light-skinned counterparts. The only quality in which dark-skinned persons were not rated lower was in sense of humour, which is quite amazing that the sense of humour that we have after being the victims of a system unleashed on us, we still have a sense of humour, which is quite amazing. We can still laugh, which shows maybe our spirit that we can still laugh about things. But we are under a system of menticide. but it just shows you how strong we are, that we can still laugh about things. However, we need to stop laughing. Well, we need to stop laughing and roll up our sleeves and go to work. 2020 in the Gregorian calendar, we need to go to work, people. We need to wake up and go to work for our children, for our future. Otherwise, we'll not have a future. Do you want to have a future for your grandchildren and their grandchildren? We need to get to work. The findings are still as relevant now as they were over 70 years ago when conceptualized by Dr. Woodson. In fact, these issues are more pronounced today. The 21st century finds that not much has changed regarding Du Bois' color line and the education of black students in the African American or in the American educational system. School integration in America is a dream deferred. Dr. King's dreams of becoming a nation in which black and white students could attend school together was based upon America being a plural society, built by contributions from all segments of American society. It is reasonable that this should be reflected in the educational curriculum. However, Dr. Kim's dream has been totally effaced by the reality of racial bias in the American educational system that conceals the significant contributions of black people. As previously discussed, this harms the educational development of black children or black students through teaching them to admire and respect only the achievements of whites, and equally denigrating or have no knowledge of their own achievements. So when you ask a 6-year-old what colour is a good colour, which colour doll would you like to, and 2/3, thankfully 1/3 have still got their minds, or they still, because I've seen some of the tests which done more recently, and they said, show me the good looking doll, and the black boy, he just grabbed a black doll and he had a big smile on his face. It's like he knew what was happening. But we need to pump up our children to raise their self-esteem. Let me tell you a story, and we're going to take a short break soon, yeah? I was at this quite a few years ago, maybe it might even be 10 years ago, I can't remember, yeah, a while ago, and was at some festival, some open air festival in a park, I believe it's in Brixton, in South London. So I was by the face painting lady who's doing the face painting, you know, they paint them like with butterflies on the face and all kind of stuff. And I was noticing that a lot of the girls wanted, because she had a book, and you flip the book over and you pick which design you wanted. And many of the girls were picking the design where the face was white. And then they put in like the different colours on the face, the lipstick and everything else. So I said to the girl, there are a lot of children, like she says, so many of our girls, probably boys as well, always, when they flick for the book, they always want the white face one. Remember, they see the princess, you know, they see the Cinderella, and they see the Sleeping Beauty, and they see all these things. And what colour is the skin? So, and she says, overwhelmingly, she said, not everybody, but overwhelmingly higher numbers, it could be like a 2/3 we saw in the black doll, white doll test. She says that these little children want her to paint their skin white. This is many years ago. And she said it's so tragic. She sees it. She does it because that's what they ask for. But it's another see. So these, is it scientific? It is scientific because it happens over again. Remember, what is science? Science is when you test something and you get the repeat answer every time, which proves that it's valid. Okay? And because she was getting the same results every time, it's a scientific test. And higher numbers, they want to have the white face. So why would little black children who are so beautiful, look like gold in comparison to other people, want to have that? So it just shows you what is happening to the minds of our children, the school system and every other part of the system. Because let's be honest, who creates TV? Who creates the TV programs? Who creates the same system, school system? It's the same people. Anyway, what we do now, we'll continue the book shortly. We're going to have a short musical break. I hope you're enjoying the show. So we'll be right back on the other side. And we'll continue reading the book.
This show is sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
What, the Black Nation? I love it. From the day before when you done this, Michael are the first. I know last. So it's the kind of songs. What's up? Love, woman and child. You, yeah. For you I really had so much love. Your love bills and coins will fade away. Could never make I so grow. Oh yeah. Black woman and child. Oh yeah. For you I got so much love. Oh. Your love bills and coins will fade away. They could never make I proud. Alone, Motherland Africa still remain so fine. Embraces and emperors living from in those times. I know you're the first to give birth and took mankind. Now let me say you're the hurt, be no megas divine. Yeah, take out to die and I give that praise. That's where my covenant will be always. How have you been going through those stages of being away for many days? Love, woman and child. Yeah. For you I really have so much love. Your love bills and kind will fade away. Only you could make my proud. Oh yeah. Black woman and child. You yeah. For you I really have so much love. Oh. Your love bills and kind will fade away. Then never yet make I proud. Who knows who will tread upon your road just to make things great. Oh yeah, you and the children, I see them in front of your face. I say, see them close, I could live, increase their faith. Marcus Garvey don't save the future from it. Oh, not trying to get the way to your needs. You were born as the one to conceive, now let my joy put away your grief. You want to child as smooth as the breeze. Woman and child, you yeah. For you I'm having so much yeah. Your little bits and times will fade away. They could never put I down. Hey. Love, woman and child, you yeah. For you I have so much love. Your little bits and times will fade away. They would never make I cross alone. One go standing at your door, just in Ethiopian clothes coming more and more. Oh, what a lovely day! The blessing is so pure. Someone conceived today. Of this I am sure. Yeah. Black woman and child. Yeah. For you have got so much love. All of this and paradise will fade away. Then never you make I proud. Oh. Black woman and child. Yeah. For you I have so much love. All of this and paradise will fade away. Then never you make I proud. Say it aloud, Kamala Africa still remains so fine. Empresses and emperors living from in those times. I know you're the first to give birth unto mankind. Now let me say you're the earth, be no niggas divine. Oh, take it to Zion, I give my praise. That's where my covenant will be always. How have you been going through those days, dumping away for many years, yeah.
Them never love the black shade. In the bleaching cream, them go dirty. Love get caught within the system. Who Boots no for shave, no stop trim. Stupid big house and bling bling. No love themselves, so them bleach on the skin. The lightning. See play the bird, brought up properly. Take from both falling. In them lane and them alley. Why bleach out to look like girl and girl want look like dolly. Love a splash from hill to the valley. So the shop fire on the bleach again. I want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Skin no peel, can't touch the street again. The beacon all them gone on the feet again. I go wine and the shop fire on the bleach again. I want Keisha fall and eat again. Skin no peel, them can't touch the street again. Them get so weak and all them gone on the feet. Them say anything what black never need. So them start say your brown skin a do it. Now a pharmacy outside them all the reach like me. Them burn up themselves with the bleach. Them same one no said them not take no speed. Some a tell I about them rolling deep. And when them sight the sun them play hide and seek. Flesh get the power by the bird man leech. Up on a feet. Just a shot fire on the bleach again. I want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Still a beat. Can't touch the street again. We can hold them gone on the feet again. Are you wine and dash a fire on the bleach again? Want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Skin a feel. Can't touch the street again. Them get so weak and hold them gone on the feet. Them say them better than the swine and the trunk row. Puss and dog get them stoop so low. I listen last never teach them to live so. Gone astray themselves they don't know. Them a fly get them noggin no tongues for. Full of negligence, them no flourish and grow. Look what happen when the elders them bleach out. For the children, no eye sample, no show the rainbow. You never preach it patchy like the preacher them. I want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Skin a peel, them can't go to street again. We can hold them gone on the feet again. Are you rain and dash a fire upon the bleach again? I want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Skin a peel, them can't go to street again. We can hold them gone on their feet again. Love get caught within the system. Boots no for shake up, no stop trim. Stupid big house and bling bling. No love themselves so them bleach them skin. I like it. See play the burn, brought up properly. Tip from out falling. In them lane and them alley. Why bleach out to look like girl and girl one look like dolly. Love a splash from the hill to the valley. So dash a fire on the bleach again. I want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Skin a peel, them can't touch the street again. We can hold them gone on the feet again. Alright, now dash a fire on the bleach again. I want Keisha fall even heater them. Skin a peel, them can't touch the street again. We can hold them gone on the feet again. Them say anything what black never need. So them start say your brown skin a do it. Now a pharmacy outside them all a reach like me. Them burn up themselves with the bleach. Them see one I said them not take no speech. I tell highway about them rolling deep. When them said listen them play hide and seek. Just get the power by the road man leech up on a feet. Fire upon the preach again. I want them no bleach and them go bleach again. Skin a peel, can't touch the street again. We can hold them gone on the feet again. Are you waiting? Now dash a fire upon the bleach again.
Mama Africa, Mama Africa, am I coming home? Am I coming home? Hello, Mama Africa, how are you? I'm feeling fine, and I hope you're fine too. Hello, Mama Africa, how are you? I hope when you hear these words, your grace turn blue. Grace turn blue. I'm saying these words to let you know how much I care, and I won't let go. Even though we're oceans away, you're with me day by day. Memories of you keep flashing through my mind. The very thought of you make my time. Hello, Mama Africa, how you see me in June. Hello, Mama Africa, how are you? I'm feeling fine and I hope you're fine too. Hello, Mama Africa, how are you? I hope when you hear these words, your grace turn blue, grace turn blue. The sweetest things are there to be found. The golden sunshine, the wind that blows around. The fresh vegetation which comes from the earth. Oh, Mama Africa, you make me know what life is worth. Hey, hello, Mama Africa, how are you? I'm feeling fine and I hope you're fine too. Hello, Mama Africa, how are you? I hope when you hear these words, your grace turn blue. Your grace turn blue, Mama Africa.
This show is sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
Yes, greetings family, and back on the other side. We are reading an excellent book, which has made some brilliant points to us, called The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. It's a book which shows you that black people generally are subjected to a mind manipulation system. TV, school, movies, Hollywood, it's all the same stuff. So I think I said earlier about it doesn't matter if a school is like shiny and beautifully painted, that does not guarantee you an excellent education. So I don't know if you see this film. There's an African American teacher, a very famous teacher, and her name was Martha Collins, and they made a movie about her. So I just did a little bit of a bit of research here online. I've got some little bit of information I'll read to you before I continue reading The Black Matrix. And remember, this is the Afrocentricity Bookman show, which is Brother Jegna. So it says Martha Collins, who would go on to develop her own educational method and empower students in urban Chicago, was born in August 31, 1936. In Alabama, she surmounted one obstacle after another to become one of the world's most famous educators. Her highly effective, controversial pedagogy was so distinctive that it became known as the Martha Collins Way. So Martha Collins, African American woman. Collins adored her father, who deeply influenced her. He was a hard-working, proud and successful businessman in the black community of a racially segregated Monroeville in Alabama. He read literature, newspapers and poetry with the young Martha each night, and she often helped him open and close the grocery store that he owned. That combination of daily reading, personalized attention and a strong work ethic would inspire her life's work. So if I move on in this, because she wanted to become a teacher but she didn't have the skills, but that worked in her benefit. It says Collins' lack of teaching degree worked to her advantage and to her students. She trusted her own experience and disregarded the Board of Education's teaching guide, which described the look and say method to teach reading. Simplistic Dick and Jane books with lots of pictures and dull workbook that drilled skills without teaching students how to think for themselves. Ignoring all of this, this is Martha Collins, developed teaching methods that truly worked. She used phonetics to teach reading, incorporated literary classics and poetry into the curriculum, facilitated in-depth discussions of the readings, and had students memorize poetry and write papers for oral delivery. And she used positive rather than punitive discipline to address misbehavior. So Martha Collins ignored the school system and created her own method. And I remember watching the film, her children were getting results better than some of these people who went to the best kind of European schools in the USA. So it just shows you. And a school was a school. A school was a house. So it wasn't no family's place. She took her children there and took these children who had low self-esteem. Some of them had some psychological issues, stuff like that. And she turned them into brilliant students. She showed them love. She used to hold the children, to touch them on the shoulder. And she just said, basically, she believed in them. And that made them brilliant students. So this woman who didn't have a teaching degree created her own method, and she became a world famous educator. So you can see, educating children at home, that's what she did. She started her own home with her own children, and other children to come to school, and before you know it, she created geniuses out of these little children. It's a very famous film, the Martha Collins story, something like it's called, Martha Collins. So please check it out. But it just shows you, education is not about the best buildings and the best this, that, and the other facilities. Sometimes it takes a good teacher who believes in the students. It's well known that teachers of my children who succeed, is like a triangle going on there. It's to do with the teachers, it's to do with the parents and the child. It's a triangle thing there. 3 aspects of education includes the child itself. But Martha Collins, look into it. He just shows you that what can be done, people, yeah? Okay, so anyway, we're reading The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones, and I'm going to continue. We are on page 109. I think this book's got about 180 pages. Dr. King would never have imagined that desegregation meant that black students would be denied an educational setting that allowed them to compete equally with the whites students. Clearly, it was an illusion to believe that African American students could receive an education that allows them to compete equally with whites in a system designed by the people responsible for oppressing them and pronouncing them as inferior. So people all understood that. He says, clearly it was an illusion to believe that African American students could be receive an education that allows them to compete equally with white children in a system designed by the people responsible for oppressing them and pronouncing them inferior. Similar to what I was saying earlier. Even after the abolition of slavery, whites refused to accept responsibility for the moral implications of their acts against their black citizens, but instead construed and legalized institutions that further subjugated, segregated, and exploited them. Perhaps what is more tragic is the fact that when these victimized black students respond accordingly to their negative educational experience through demonstrating feelings of self-hatred, disaffection of education, and disruptive behaviors, these responsive behaviors are then used by the dominant white culture to further affirm and perpetuate their own racist notions of white racial superiority over blacks. Unfortunately, many African American students never fully recover from the adverse impact of their mortifying educational experience. By the time they complete school or drop out, the damage has already been done, and the effects remain with them for their entire lives. In order to build a stronger Black America, we must ensure that our children are provided with an education that enables them to effectively compete with white students. It should also afford them the same opportunities to succeed in the 21st century. And we are, we not merely preparation for the available low-level jobs or even the high-level jobs that they serve no worthwhile purpose beyond individual advancement. It is time to take interest in our future, seriously by achieving quality education for our children. A new reality for African children will only be built upon black society who dares to take control of the education of their own children. I couldn't agree any more. Until we take control of our children's education, we're going to continue to have issues. I mean, in my family, I've got girls that got PhD. My niece is a PhD. So it can be done. However, this is not the majority. And many kind of fall by the wayside, or let's put it this way, they do not reach their full potential. We shouldn't just be, I mean, if all you can do maybe is to maybe fill shelves or things like that, that's fair enough. But if your potential is to be like a doctor or a nurse or a scientist, you're being wasted by filling shelves. Some people finish shelves, that's their thing, that's no problem at all. But if you're supposed to be a scientist, filling shelves is not the correct way for you, yeah? You don't reach your full potential. So many of us, our children are locked up in prison, stuff like that. We could be the doctors who create who cure cancer. But on their way, what's happened to them? They're derailed by the system that tells them that they're inferior. Anyway, I continue. And as long as black people rely upon whites to tell us which of our children are normal, we will never know the genius of our students. African Americans deserve a quality education, free from protracted and debilitating battles. They deserve a system that promotes their education and sense of self-worth, rather than one that discourages them by excluding them. They deserve an educational curriculum that enables them to feel good about themselves, their past, and their potential. A pluralistic society is one where all people are treated with respect, dignity, equality, and fairness, regardless of racial differences. Therefore, Africans have every right to expect that the content of their education will be true, appropriate, relevant, and complete, and among other things, that upon completion of the public schools, our children will have the general skills to enter the world of employment and to be fully functional, members of society. And I always believe people that our children, I think this was Amos Wilson. Amos Wilson, people, one of our greatest black psychologists. Please Google Amos Wilson for you who don't know, or please buy his book. You can still buy his books. Amos Wilson said, what would our educational system look like if our children were taught to create jobs? Excuse me. Many of us think that we need to send our children to school so they can get a job afterwards. But Amos Wilson says, what would the educational system for black people look like if the education system created in our children the ability to create their own jobs rather than look for a job? See, we have to dare to think big. We should not think, we should let people judge us. Who are these people to judge us? Who are anybody to judge us? Our only judges are ourselves and the cosmos. Us and the Creator as our only judge. The limit is the moons, the stars. That's our limit. A pluralistic society where all people are treated with respect, dignity, equality, fairness, regardless of racial differences. Therefore, African Americans have every right to expect that the content of their education will be true, appropriate, relevant, and complete. And among other things, that upon completion of the public school, our children have the general skills to enter the world of employment and be fully functional members of society. Such an education is a right of all children and not merely one elite group. The future of black America, or the future of the African world, people, the future of the African world, I'm going to add to this, will be only as strong as the opportunities that exist for them to attend these types of schools. We shape our future by the way that we educate our children. Let me repeat that. We shape our future by the way that we educate our children. Have you heard of the saying, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world? Please keep that one in mind. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. The future of Black America will only be as strong as the opportunities that exist for them to attend these types of schools. We shape our future by the way we educate our children. Therefore, there must be an alternative for every child who is in school that does not serve that child well. The time has come for us to recognize this unfulfilled need of society, thus fulfilling the promise of true equality. So this is Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman show every Sunday between 4 and 6 p.m. on Bless Radio. So Bless Radio family, you know you have the best shows on there. Make sure you tune into Bless Radio every day of the week. On the internet, you can go to, you probably know, you can go to Tuning Radio app or blessradio.co.uk or blessradio.com to get your details, yeah? If you go to YouTube and go to the Bless Radio 1 on YouTube, you can get to the YouTube channel, yeah? YouTube channel, Bless Radio 1 is the YouTube channel. Ensure you log into all these, because we're giving you education, what is needed, yeah? We need to shake out a lot of this stuff, baggage we have in our minds, and get rid of it. We need to move forward. This year, make this year the first year where we say, yes, we're going to do this stuff. It's easy to procrastinate. Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. We need to stop talking about this. One of the things we need to sort out is our economics. Why? Because with economics, we can build our institutions. I don't think we need Buckingham Palace, but we need to have our own institutions so we can do what needs to be done. We need institutions which is life protecting for black people. We need institutions that are life preserving, life fulfilling for black people. Right, so I'm on chapter 3 now. This is page 111 on chapter 3. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman show. We've got about 30 minutes left of the show, okay? So chapter 3, the negative portrayal of Africa also equates to psychological warfare. Psychological warfare, and this is what the book's about. And again, I like to quote, because I learn from these greats, Malcolm X. Malcolm X says that they always show Africa in a negative light. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. They always show Africa in a negative light, you know, savages and animals and wild this and that, wild that, never in a positive light. So by hating Africa, you began to hate yourself, because you cannot hate a tree if you hate the roots of the tree or the fruit. So they portray Africa negative. Have you noticed? See, like there's a war breaks out, something breaks out in Africa, and you see people running to the airport. Who do you notice there? Europeans. These people who want to tell us that Africa's so terrible, it's jungles and this and that and wildness and da-da-da, savages. But these people are always there. Anytime you see there's some sort of chaos, some sort of war, look and see who's running to the airplanes. Loads of non-Africans are in there, because they're all getting their money, because they know you can make money there. And the one thing we need to do as African people, we need to start investing there. I was watching a video, but I'm sure you all know Dr. Arikana Chihumbori Kwao. She was a former ambassador for the African Union in the USA. And she says that we need to get there. African leaders want us to invest there. This is African people. We cannot complain what's happening there. We talk, oh, the Chinese doing this. How can you complain about the China when you're not there? I remember I worked many years ago, and someone said, oh, how that person to get that job? And somebody said to them, did you apply for the job? He said, no. Then they said, how the hell can you complain about somebody getting the job when you didn't apply for the job? Same thing about Africa. We should stop saying, oh, those Chinese, those Lebanese, those Indian. What are you doing yourself? Unless you're doing it yourself, do not complain about what other people are doing. We like to complain. We need to get rid of that. Afrocentricity International, we say we stop complaining now. We don't hear people, oh, listen. Forget about that. We need thought and speech and vocabulary about liberation. That's the only way we can move forward. We need to move forward. We need to do what needs to be done, okay? Simple. Chapter 3, the negative portrayal of Africa, also equates to psychological warfare. To better understand the total picture of white miseducation and its effect on black people, an exploration of historical developments is necessary. The psychodynamic factors affecting present-day black Americans have beginnings that are deeply rooted in how Africa is portrayed historically and presently. How we view our past actively determines how we perceive ourselves. Let us imagine, for example, that an intruder were to break into your home and robbed it of all its valuables. Let us further say that this intruder kidnapped your children, making them into their personal slaves, and then destroying your home by burning it to the ground. Then, to make your children into more loyal servants, the kidnappers routinely showed them pictures of their ruined home, but revised the story to indicate that these invaders had merely rescued your children from their ruined home. In time, these children will become grateful to the intruders for rescuing them. This conceptualization is very much what has happened to the psyches of African Americans, who are constantly subjected to images of war-torn, famine-ridden, rampantly illiterate, and disease-stricken Africa. Today, African Americans are deliberately given only those images of Africa that are designed to produce the shame of their heritage. Have you noticed, people, I digress here, what the charities do? What images do the charities show of Africa? If you see some of the African cities, they're better than cities in the West. Beautiful cities. But what do they show you? This is Tommy. Tommy's starving. Please help Tommy. Please send us some money so we can send Tommy some money. And always walking. They got dirty water. Now, don't get me wrong. We know there's some people in Africa who needs help, need resources, organisation. And these are the things that we can bring to Africa. However, they always project Africa negatively. It's relentless what these charities do. And the worst thing about the charities, say you give them £1, about 10 or 20 pence will go to help the people. 80% they keep for themselves, for their wages. So they have pretty offices, like the latest 4x4s. These big charities, I won't give none of them my money. Did you know that in the USA one, the Red Cross in USA Red Cross, the Haitian earthquake I should say, happened there, yeah, good. They raised $1 billion. Do you know what the Red Cross in USA did with that $1 billion? They built 8 houses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They built 8 houses in Haiti. They raised $1 billion and bought 8 houses. And when I said to them, why didn't you do more? Oh, well, the regulations there, we just can't do it. These people just pocket the money out of our misery. I will never give any of these big charities. We support the small charities and support groups. We support this all the time. We do, or don't forget next year or later this year, Our Legacy do the quiz night, fundraising quiz nights. Quiz night's probably going to be in April this year. Please keep an eye out for that. We need to support us, so we give money. We give money to small charities, support groups, so we know where the money goes. We'll never give money to these big charities. These people are terrible. They're there, and what was happening in Haiti as well? Those people there, these people are dying. They're having sex parties there. Remember they got found out? Sex parties. 12-year-old, 30-year-old, 14 years old. This is what the charities go over there to do. And then the charity says, oh, we're so sorry, we didn't realise, if only we'd known. I'll never give my money to these people. These people are just wicked people. But I digress again. Right, so, okay. Then, to make our children into more loyal servants, the kidnappers routinely showed them pictures of their ruined homes, but revised the story to indicate that they rescued our children from those ruined homes, not ruining themselves. In time, these children will become grateful to the intruder for rescuing them. This conceptualization very much is what happens to the psyches of many African Americans, Africans in the Caribbean, Africans in Europe, who are constantly subjected to images of worn-torn, famine-ridden, rampantly illiterate and disease-stricken Africa. Today, African Americans are deliberately given only those images of Africa that are designed to produce shame of their heritage. The deplorable depictions of Africa, displaying only its poorest communities, are in fact designed to make African in the diaspora generally, feel grateful that it was their ancestors were enslaved and brought to America. They are being subconsciously, my apologies, they are being subconsciously told that they are the lucky ones who have been taken away from the backwardness of Africa. Africans in Africa, on the other hand, are shown in return, for the most part, those images of African Americans in a culturally disconnected, buffoonery and criminal manner. These methods of manipulation meets the goal of divide and conquer. Many African Americans today feel grateful that their forefathers were those Africans who were enslaved and brought from the backwardness land that is Africa. So do we believe this? It's facts. I remember watching a video of this woman, and she said something on the lines of, "Oh, I'm glad that I was enslaved, because if I was still in Africa, I'd be worshipping a tree and not Jesus." This is the backwardness of the educational system, but it's deliberate. Also, you may or may not know, is that Africans are told, don't trust African Americans. And vice versa. When they go to the USA, they say, look out for the African Americans. They hate you. They hate you. I'm telling you, because these people actually said this. They tell Africans coming from, Nigeria, Senegal, where they're coming from, when they get to USA, look out for African Americans. Don't trust them. They hate you. So what does that do? Divide and conquer. And then when they show African Americans, what is the image of African Americans worldwide? How does Hollywood and the likes display African Americans, doesn't matter who the hell they are, how are they displayed worldwide? What are 9, if not 8 out of 10 movies display African Americans? 8 out of 10 movies depict them as criminals. So our image around the world is created by racists. Think about this. The image of Africa is created by racists, because who do you think Hollywood is? How did Hollywood depict the Native Americans who have been slaughtered for their own land? They were the savages, remember? And John Wayne's people were the good guys. The people committing the genocide are the good guys. And then African Americans, how are African Americans portrayed? Buffoons, foolish, or criminals. And this image is projected around the world. So Chinese, Japanese, India, Indonesia, doesn't matter where it is, they all get the same image. Our image be created. But the sad thing is, we take, because nobody watches TV more than us. We imbibe this whole concept of ourselves as well. Think about African American children. They're taught from a very young age that you're probably going to be a criminal, or that's all you're good at, to be a criminal. This is the system that this book is talking about. Psychological warfare we are under. It doesn't matter where we are, we're in the same psychological warfare. When you go back in history, the ancient Greeks, the first Europeans who were civilized, because we civilized them, by the way, according to them, not according to me, according to the ancient Greeks, they're educated by black people. They called African people the most just of men, the favorites of the gods. Even when Islam was raging through Africa, the Islamic scholar says, oh, you can walk anywhere in Africa in complete safety. You don't have to worry about anything. So our people historically have always been known as the honest, the just, the kind people. However, what has Hollywood and the like done to our image now? We are now the criminals. So imagine The people have been subjected to the worst criminal or the worst crimes in history of the world. 400 years of enslavement, which includes the rape, the burning, the murder, the maiming, you name it, will be turned into criminals. So the people who are the victims of the worst criminal acts in history somehow are the criminals. And the people who carried out these criminal acts are somehow the good guys. They are the Captain America and Batman and Robin. See how they can turn stuff. Remember that, and again, our scholars, our educators says that the press can make the innocent seem guilty and the guilty seem innocent. And that's what they do every day. That is the power of the press, the power of the media. The guilty are shown as the innocent, and the innocent are shown as the guilty. And that is the power of the press. And that is the power of psychological warfare that we are under, which is the TV, which is the media, the movies, which just kind of underpins what happened in the school system. But I continue. This is the Afrocentricity Book Show, and we are reading The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. The deplorable depictions of Africa, displaying only its poorest communities, are in fact designed to make African Americans and Africans all over the world feel grateful that their ancestors were enslaved and brought to America. They are being subconsciously told that they are the lucky ones to have been taken from the backwardness of Africa. Africans in Africa, on the other hand, are shown in return, for the most part, those images of African Americans in a culturally disconnected, buffoonery and criminal manner. These methods of manipulation meet the goal of divide and conquer. Many African Americans today feel grateful that their forefathers were those Africans who were enslaved and brought from the backward land that is Africa. You need to understand that when Europeans came to Africa, Africa was far superior in civilization than Europeans. But what Europeans did have is the weapons of mass destruction and the mindset to use them, because they always fight war. Even you go back to history, and I think the Greeks, and they speak about the Germans, says the Germans don't want to plough the ground. All they want to do is fight war. These are Northern Europeans, but the culture spread. Yeah, so these people are naturally. Have you noticed that USA spends more on arms than every other country in the world put together? Why is that? Have you noticed that their crest, they've got an eagle, which obviously comes from the Nile Valley, but in one hand they've got like the arrows, and the other hand they've got the symbols of peace. And as someone said to me before, it says the reason why they got in one claw they got the arrows and the other claw they got symbols of peace is that if you don't give it up peacefully, we'll take it. So if that makes sense to you, yeah? But you can see they use this system to manipulate the minds of people day in, day out. And when you don't understand what's happening, you just believe that it's natural. But that is the old day. I remember in the time of Marcus Garvey, they call people the new Negro and race men. That's what we need to be. We need to be the new Africa now. We need to be race men as well, and women. We need to do what needs to be done. Time has long passed for us to keep on going around in circles like we are. We need to stand up and fight for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We need to do it now. Simple. The negative portrayal of Africa, combined with the ongoing miseducation concerning Africa, creates feelings of embarrassment among many African diaspora people concerning their African heritage. Many blacks have actually developed a psyche wherein they have learned to be grateful that their ancestors were enslaved ones, brought to America, and believe themselves to be lucky ones. Had their ancestors not been captured, they will still be in Africa, in famine, disease, and naked. Dr. John Henry Clark, the renowned African-American historian, who was ancestor now, and author and lecturer, stated, "A history of a people is like the relationship between a mother and a child." He supports this hypothesis. He added, history tells a people who they are and what they have accomplished, and that history is like a clock that tells the people their geographical time of day. Dr. Ronald D. Steele of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 1989 concurred with Dr. Clark's analogies, stating that knowledge of history and heritage enhances one's self-esteem. It gives one the basis to make accurate, concrete interpretations of current events, and it encourages the people to aspire for the highest in society in spite of obstacles. Let me repeat that again. Dr. Clark stated, knowledge of history and heritage enhances one's self-esteem. It gives one the basis to make accurate, concrete interpretations of current events, and it encourages a people to aspire for the highest in society in spite of obstacles. These observations are very unsettling when we consider that within the American educational curriculum and through the controlled media, the historical and present images of Africa are more of a symbol of shame than a source of pride. In order for black people to develop a proper and healthy psyche in terms of their attitude towards Africa, they must be taught the truth about the undoing of Africa. Very powerful. So this subheading there is called The Undoing of Africa. Most African Americans are totally unaware of the actual details of how Africa was raped, robbed and left desolate by the European powers, including America. The beginning of Africa's undoing took place during slavery, beginning in America in the 1500s and lasted for 4 centuries. During this time, some 50 million black men and women were taken from Africa. And it's much more than that, by the way. Remember, it's been estimated that 20 million Africans died in the Middle Passage alone. 20 million Africans died in the Middle Passage alone. That is the passage when they've been taken from Africa to wherever they're going to, the Caribbean, USA. 20 million. We are told repeatedly about 6 million Jews who died, and clearly 6 million Jews being killed is terrible. But 20 million died in the Middle Passage. Does not even mention the tens and tens and tens of millions who were killed in USA, in Barbados, Jamaica, St. Lucia, in Cuba, Panama, Colombia, Argentina. Do I need to go on? Most African Americans are totally unaware of the actual details of how Africa was raped, robbed, and left desolate by European powers, including America. The beginning of Africa's undoing took place during slavery, beginning in America in the 1500s and lasted for 4 centuries. During this time, some 50 million black men and women were taken from Africa. The slaves were initially acquired by trading with Africans. This is incorrect, by the way, okay? So Africans were first acquired by slave raiding, started by the Portuguese, then the Spanish, then the Dutch, then the British and the French. Slave raiding. They loaded up their ships with horses and guns, then went to Africa and let them loose into Africa. Portuguese, first of all. They captured them, took them on the ship, took them back to Lisbon in Portugal. And somebody wrote, a Portuguese writer wrote what he saw, and these Africans were there crying and bawling. They were separating the mother from the fathers from the mothers, the children. Terrible scenes. The British, John Hawkins, the first slaver. John Hawkins in the 1600s, 1700s. John Hawkins made 3 trips to Africa. He made so much money that Queen Elizabeth I gave him her ship, a fleet of ships, the good ship Jesus. John Hawkins said he went to Africa and he found these Africans who were very gentle and kind, and he started to kill them and kidnap them. He kidnapped 300 and took them away. and sold them to the Spanish, Portuguese people in the so-called New World. He made so much money. That's what the Queen said, oh, here's my ships, you can take one. Because they made the royal family extremely rich. He made 3 trips, kidnapping 300, 400 at a time. So if you notice, he was kidnapping them. We're told about a slave trade, aren't we? There was no trade until they set the trade up. If there was a slave trade, they wouldn't need to go and kidnap them. So Hawkins, remember the British were the backward people. The southern Europeans, Spain, Portugal, were educated because the Moors ruled Spain for 700 years. So these people were educated. Could we educated them? When the British got in there, 150 years later, they were still slave raiding because there was not a slave trade set up until Europeans set it up. Remember, Europeans were selling each other for centuries before they even left Africa. Because they were destroying Europe, the Pope said, listen, you better leave. And the Pope gave Spain one way and gave Portugal the other way. He drew a line on the map and said, go out there and do what you want to do. Kill heathens, enslave heathens. So we've got the Pope, everybody, Catholics, please remember that. Pope sent them out there to come to capture you because you're a heathen, by the way. And then eventually they went to the New World. They wiped out the people, the Arawaks, Tianos, they wiped them out. They enslaved the Tianos first to enslave them. They enslaved them for them to mine the gold and silver and anything else they could steal. When they wiped out all these people, that's when they said, Bartholomew Las Casas, a friend of Columbus, said, Africans, you go and get the Africans, they're probably stronger. And that's when they started to enslave us. So if you want to blame Africans for slavery, then you need to blame Africans for the enslavement of Europeans enslaving each other. First of all, selling them to the Arabs. And then you need to blame the Africans for when Europeans enslaved the Arawaks and other Native American people. So the system was conceived and created in Europe. You cannot start slavery on the shores of Africa. Centuries occurred. But eventually they Christianized people from the 1500s. They said, yeah, you can do trade with us, but you must become a Christian. They Christianized us so they can control us. They didn't Christianize us with love because these people don't believe in God. You don't slaughter people like water. You don't slaughter people like flies. If you're a Christian, because Christians must love people, but they just slaughtered and slaughtered and slaughtered. This is in their own history books. So we have to understand. We need to understand the picture. They like to blame us for our enslavement, but that is the victors blaming the victims in their own victimization. And nothing don't go so. I continue. The beginning of Africa's undoing took place during slavery in America in the 1500s and lasted for 4 centuries. During this time, some 50 million black men and women were taken from Africa. The slaves were initially acquired after slave raiding by trading, as his book says, with Africans. But by the time the white men grew more endearing, and after assessing their weapons' superiority over the inferior weapons possessed by the Africans, driven by their greed for greater profits, they used their superior weapons to begin kidnapping black people. And when the Africans attempted to resist the invasion, their spears and blades were no match against the guns and cannons possessed by the whites. This meant tremendous profits for individuals and firms involved in a period of many years. Of the estimated 50 million blacks taken from Africa, taken to America, I should say, only 40 million actually reached America because mortality rates during the voyage to America were extremely high. In addition to the slave trade, there were gold, diamonds and silver, which further strengthened the European and American economies. It was not uncommon for a slavery operation to return a 300% profit in a year. The slave trade, like the production of Africa's gold, diamond and silver mines, provided essential capital for the advancement of European technology and industrialization. I'm sure many of you learned in this country about the Industrial Revolution. I hope you realize it's funded by slavery. There's a book called Capitalism and Slavery. The Industrial Revolution was funded by slavery. but they will never teach it at school. In America, the millions of enslaved workers did much to convert an undeveloped wilderness into a rich modern country. America's products such as sugar, cotton and tobacco were in great demand in Europe and required an abundance of field labor. Slavery allowed cheap production of these vital commodities that gave America its robust economic start. By contrast, a number of regions in Africa suffered significant losses of productive members of the populace, leading to economic collapse. So let me say that, because if you read the book by Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, remember for 400 years they were taking out the best 15 to 25 to 30 year old were taken out of Africa for 400 years. So the people who bring, the new technology, new advances, were taken out of Africa. One of the reasons Africa went into decline was because of the greatest of the people who would bring advancement were taken out of the country. Sucked out of Africa for centuries. Imagine your greatest minds being sucked out of Africa. By contrast, a number of regions in Africa suffered significant losses of productive members of the populace, leading to economic collapse. Aside from being inhumane, the slave trade was primarily responsible for wrecking the economy of 3 regions: East Africa coast, the Congo, and parts of the Guinea coast. So basically East Africa, West Africa, and Congo in Central Africa. Destroyed. The Portuguese tried to take over the East Africa trade, but they were not smart enough, so they went down the East African coast and burnt all the cities. They said they came off their ships, they put the cross down and set fire to all these towns of Malindi, for example, Kilwa, down the East African coast. They were called the Swahili states. Because they thought if they destroyed this nation, they could take off the coast, but they was not smart enough, so they lost everything. But they destroyed the African nations at the same time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call it a halt there. We can start next week, yeah? I'm on page 113. We'll continue again next week. So history is the only thing that explains the present day, by the way. The only criteria that explains the present day is history. So anyway, we'll continue. This is the Brother Jegna signing out now. We'll continue reading The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones next week. You have a great week with your family. Remember, this is a new year. We need to wake up, people. We need to keep on going. So have a great week, and I'll catch you again next week, yeah? One love, my
This
people.
show is sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
The angels are dancing in heaven. You hear me? Wake up, people. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up now. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up the people, Lord. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up now. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up.